witnessed how the former president incited his base to insurrection. It was in plain sight. We've also learned a whole lot about his parallel effort behind the scenes to overturn the election from inside the government. First, we learned about how Trump pressured state officials directly, including his demand that Georgia's Secretary of State magically find or fabricate more than 11,000 votes. Then, just last week, we learned that Trump tried to coerce his acting attorney general to just declare that the 2020 election was corrupt. And most recently, we learned that a Trump-backed loyalist in the Justice Department was intent on asking 6 states to take steps to nullify Joe Biden's victory. Those abuses are among the reasons that former U.S. Attorney Barbara McQuade and other legal scholars are calling on the Justice Department to begin a criminal investigation of Trump's dangerous course of conduct. But the truth is that Trump's effort to overturn the election fits a long and well-documented pattern of abuse. In fact, he pursued the same goal using the very same tactics when he leveraged Ukraine to smear his political opponent in 2019. In both cases, there was zero evidence to support his false claims of corruption. In both cases, he was calling for a sham investigation to try and help himself stay in power by destroying the opposition. And in both cases, he sought a public announcement to legitimize his false claims, a declaration of corrupt election from the DOJ and an announcement of an investigation of Joe Biden from Ukraine. I'm joined now by a key witness from the Ukraine impeachment investigation, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, a former director for European Affairs at the NSC and the author of Here, Right Matters, An American Story. Also with me is Barbara McQuade, former U.S. Attorney and a University of Michigan law professor. Thank you for being here. And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, it's great to talk with you. Thank you for being here. I hope you can hear me. I hear a little bit of feedback in my my audio, so hopefully you can hear me. You talk about the fact that when you heard this call with the Ukrainian president, you immediately knew it was an impeachable offense. Talk a little bit about that.
That's right. Thanks for having me on, first of all. It's interesting that from the very beginning, although it seems to me like that President Trump was surprised that he was president, he was unready to govern, he was always looking forward for the next opportunity to continue his enterprise and continue to profit off his office. And I witnessed that firsthand in my tenure at the White House on the National Security Council when he attempted to steal the election very early on. And what we're witnessing now is a continuing enterprise. In my case, I heard the phone call. To me, it was readily apparent that he was looking to find dirt on Joe Biden so that he can, first of all, undermine his candidacy into the primaries, so he never made the cut in order to run against him, and ultimately to tarnish him before he was a candidate. He was a opponent in the primary elections.
As somebody who is obviously in the United States military and somebody who sat on the National Security Council, we're now seeing this sort of love affair on the right with people like Viktor Orban of Hungary. We already saw Donald Trump's, being so enamored with Vladimir Putin and autocrats in general, even the North Korean dictator. Did you spy from the beginning in working and being on the National Security Council that Trump was more like those kinds of far-right authoritarian leaders, or did it take a while for that to sink in?
It took a little while. Frankly, I knew that he had some strongman tendencies, but in my view, I was actually joining an administration that was going to fulfill policy that advanced U.S. national security interests. We actually did some pretty good work. We drafted a document, a national security strategy, with a Russia component to it, and we implemented large portions of it. The problem is that the president's direct involvement too often derailed the strategy that we had in place to advance U.S. national security interests. It was the president's proxies that were acting un-American, that were undermining national security directly. And that's who we had to deal with on a regular basis.
And Barbara, let me go to you on this, because the thing that Donald Trump, the things he did throughout his administration, I objected to pretty much every single one of them. But the thing he did at the end, in trying to keep himself in power by perverting the systems of government over which he had charge, in terms of perverting the Justice Department, attempting to use every lever of government, and not just at the federal level, but to pervert state governments as well. That is the thing that to me is the most Putin-esque, or, so the most like sort of an Orban-esque move. If there are no legal consequences for him for having tried to do that, in your view, what happens?
I agree with you, Joy. I think that there needs to be legal consequences, and that's about the piece that I wrote that you referenced earlier. I think that there could be a reluctance on the part of the Justice Department to go after their political predecessors, lest it appear that they're simply motivated by politics. But the conduct here is so incredibly egregious. First, of course, they would have to amass the evidence, but to begin an investigation because of the severe nature of the alleged crime here, trying to subvert the outcome of a fair and free election. Our democracy is all about power to the people, self-governance. And if that election of the people can be subverted, then we have destroyed our democracy.
And, you know, the risk that you took, I want to go back to Lieutenant Colonel Finn Midnight. You're right about the fact that your father, and you are like myself, you're the son of immigrants, you're the child of immigrants, and your father, who emigrated from that part of the world, he was reluctant for you to come forward because he feared retribution against you and the consequences. And talk a little bit about trying to convince him that this is a different kind of country, because I think that's the question we're having now. Are we a different kind of country than a Hungary or a Russia if we don't do it, if we don't, stop ourselves from sliding?
We are, if we want it to be a different kind of country. We are a country where right matters, but only if we make it matter. I think for my dad, he was just responding viscerally to his 47 years in the Soviet Union and assessing the keen risk to me, precedent in that he actually, correctly judged that I would lose my military career. Mm-hmm. But in another regard, he was not accurate. It's the fact that we have amazing civil servants in government that were a check against a presidential overreach. And that's frankly, in my book, the president is a bit of a foil. He's a way to overcome challenges in that he's corrupt, and there are plenty of people that are not corrupt, that are trying to do the right thing, that are trying to advance U.S. national security interests. It is not a deep state looking to undermine, a president that governs properly. This is a person that is very erratic, does not actually provide guidance, and when he does, it's by tweet. And therefore, most oftentimes, it's damage control. And that's what the government under the last 4 years under the previous administration was like.
And Barbara, it occurs to me that, I think we just have this inherent belief that America has a permanent democracy, but no country has a permanent democracy, right? I mean, you think about, I go back to Viktor Orban only because he's become sort of the new plaything and tchotchke of people like Tucker Carlson, who did this fawning interview with him, in which he sort of bigged him up. And Greg Sargent writes that it provided a deeply unsettling glimpse into the true nature of the authoritarian nationalist future that Carlson and his fellow travelers envisioned for us, for our country. Let me play a little bit of that interview.
We are an example that somebody or a country which is based on traditional values, on national identity, based on tradition of Christianity, could be successful, or sometimes even more successful than a leftist liberal government.
Orban has announced that he's going to be president basically for life, for the next 20 years. And Barbara, I wonder if you could have a conversation with our current Attorney General, who, to your point, really seems reluctant to use the power that he has to hold the former president to account. What I fear is that Trump becomes the next Orban, that he finds a way to manipulate the Republicans who are now in power and doing his bidding, so that the next time he tries this coup, it works. And then he's in there and we can't get rid of him. What would you say to the current leader of the Justice Department about this stance of saying, I don't know, he wants to be too careful and not touch the former president for whatever reason?
Well, first, I guess I would say we don't know what's going on internally at the Justice Department. It may very well be that they are investigating, but they're doing it under the normal procedures where you would keep those pending investigations quiet. So maybe it's possible. But if not, and if he is still deciding whether it's necessary to bring charges, I think we have to think about the very significant harm that President Trump came very, very close to committing and could commit again. One of the purposes of criminal prosecution is not only punishment and public safety, but also deterrence. And if President Trump feels like he got away with this, then who's to say he won't try it again, or others won't try to get away with it again? I'm so grateful for people like Colonel Vindman, who showed such courage and integrity. And we saw at the Justice Department that there were others who, perhaps following Colonel Vindman's lead, also had some courage and integrity in acting Attorney General Rosen and his deputy Richard Donahue. But how about Jeffrey Clark, who was ready to be the henchman for Donald Trump? You know, next time it may be that we have more Clarks than we have Rosens or Vindmans. And so I think we do need to take a strong stand that this is a really egregious crime against the United States. And certainly we need to make sure the evidence is there. But prosecutors always deal with, number one, can we charge based on the evidence? But number two, should we charge? Is there a substantial federal interest here that needs to be vindicated? And I can think of no substantial federal interest. It's more important than our democracy.
Indeed, and there are more Clarks already because the Vindmans have been purged, including yourself, sir. Good luck with the book, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. You're a hero for what you did for your country, so thank you very much. We appreciate you. Barbara McQuaid, always appreciate you both. All right. And the book, again, is Here Right Matters. Still ahead, the Missouri governor displays some, interesting priorities by pardoning the gun-toting McCloskeys while 2 black men languish in prison for crimes that the prosecutors say that they didn't commit. We'll be right back.